The other thing I want to point out to you today as you just build this project out is that some of these things are going to work best um, with keyframing of multiple um, aspects of the effect. So, for example, this hawk that's flying, I think that this would actually be a cool one to move across the sky instead of just stand still, like it doesn't go anywhere. And so this brings up a couple of points for me. One is that you might have noticed that we were starting to get some herky jerky movement there, like we were dropping frames on playback. Look at this. We've got like an over 4K sequence, and while there's just a still image in it, that's a lot of pixels we're pushing each frame, and then we were stacking as many as five videos up on top of each other that are all getting processed through at least one, if not two, effects, simultaneously. Plus, I think I'm exporting the previous tutorial that I made about different software at the same time. If you get into that scenario and you're having a hard time playing back, especially on a home computer or a laptop or something, the easiest place to change, as I believe I mentioned in class, is down here on the bottom right. You can change from full resolution to half, to quarter, or even less. And you do lose some quality in your playback, right, while you're working. I mean, it looks fuzzy as it plays, but you can get through making the project this way. And then on the export, you don't lose any quality. This is just for the sake of previewing. So there's two things I want to do here. One is easier than the other. I don't want to fight with the color correction of trying to make this lighter blue sky from the 70s footage match here, because even if I succeeded, I'm going to move this across the sky and I'll block the clouds and stuff like that. So instead, I'm going to use, under opacity, I'm going to use a different blend mode. This is going to be a fairly broad strokes solution. It won't be perfect because it'll still change the clouds a little bit. But what I think I'm going to do here is, instead of normal, I'm going to change this to darken. And so you can see it does achieve kind of a lot of what I was hoping for. It's going to screw up my clouds a little bit, but I think for now I'm going to say that's okay. And if at some later point it bugs me too much, then I would choke in that matte to make it much smaller and just around the bird as a way to avoid some of this. But for now, let's go with darken, and then I'm going to work on doing multiple keyframes across multiple effects. So what I mean by that is, on rotate projection, I'm going to set keyframes on all three of these at the beginning and end of this footage. Bup, bup, bup. And then as we go, I'm going to have it start somewhere else. And to do this right, I think I'm going to ditch my cross dissolves temporarily so that I can see it all the way through its process. And basically, I think I'm going to view the sky and try to swing this bird from one side of the sky to the other. And this is where, as I was complaining about before, I would love rotate projection to work the way that I believe it worked in my memory, because it can be fussy to get the right location. But if we do it now, it feels more like this bird is flying all the way across the sky. All right. And I just have to do it. I said I wouldn't, but I can't stand it. I've got to bring that mask in. So one great thing about masks is when you make them, you can always remake them. So I can drag these points in and try to just get a little closer to my bird. And remember, you can keyframe mats too. So the next thing that'll bug me until I finally do it, but I may not do it on camera in front of you, is not just choking this mat in, but actually animating it frame by frame, so that this is the mat here, but then we step forward and change it, and step forward and change it, so that it's always as close as it can be without actually cutting anything off. But for now, I'm going to accept this as our solution. So here now, I've got keyframes on all three aspects of rotate projection, sending that bird across our sky. And throwing across dissolve on either end. So while you may not have learned any So while this process today has been kind of iterative, that is to say, just doing things you already know how to do over and over again and iterating on them, this is ultimately the process that that you would go through to build a project like fossil hunting in the Gobi, or it's a relatively similar process to the way that I built iLidian, my abstract 360 VR film, essentially taking flat video, treating each clip with the effects it needs in its own sequence, and then nesting those sequences into a larger sequence, and applying VR plane to sphere to make whatever adjustments, either still adjustments or keyframed adjustments, to its position. And so if you're working on the Premiere version of this final project, that's essentially your assignment now, is sourcing a lot of interesting video. You don't have to stay in one location the whole time. You can have cuts and go to other backgrounds and things like that. So sourcing images, sourcing video, and then starting to process it and build it into a collage that always has something interesting to look at in every direction.